You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I am your host, Doug Thorpe. And today my guest has a fascinating body of work he has put together. His name is Steve Anderson. He's been a kind of a lifelong student of risk and risk management, helping people with that. But more importantly, he has studied and crafted a book that he has entitled The Bezos Letters. And I'm going to let him explain what all that involves. But before we get into that, Steve, welcome to the show.
Doug, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So as has become a bit of a tradition on my shows, give us a little background of your story and how you've got to where you are.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
So
we'll give it the back of the magazine.
I will give you the shortest version I can. Maybe. I've actually been part of the insurance industry my entire career. Out of college, went to work for an insurance company for a couple of years, got trained as an underwriter, and then went to work for an independent agency located in Washington, D.C. Fast forward, I was there for 13 years and then left, moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, also started working for an insurance agency there. And that's kind of where I got my first taste for technology and its impact on that type of business. Fast forward to the end of the 90s, 99, I decided to go out on my own and do speaking, writing, and consulting around technology for that niche, which is what I've been in ever since. Kind of through that process, I actually started asking the question, because technology continues to grow rapidly, is the biggest risk business face actually not taking enough risk? And that was the kind of the spark of an idea that led to the book that we published called, as you already said, Doug, The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon.
So let's kind of dive right in on that first sort of revelation you had, the idea that is the key to business growth, taking more risk. I think that's a huge challenge. And I know from where I come from, I was a banker for many years. And, at the core of what banks do is we manage risk. Mm-hmm. We look at opportunities that may be presented and the financing that goes with that, and then make our own assessments of the risk reward of that, and may or may not agree to do the financing accordingly. But you fast forward that and kind of dive deep into the entrepreneurial world. There are wonderful, talented, and gifted people out there that are passionate about this idea they come up with. Yet I can't deny that in a lot of the case histories I know, the reason the company never took off is because that owner founder wasn't ready to make the next step. They weren't ready to take that risk. And the way I learned to describe it is, when you're growing a business, it is not the nice, smooth, little upward sloping line that they show you in business school. It is a very jagged edge of major decision points. And to give a simple example, if you're in any kind of manufacturing, to get to the next level of volume output, you may have to invest in a very expensive piece of machinery to get you there. And this new opportunity you have is not even a nickel's worth of difference in how to pay for that machine. So you have that giant stair step part of your curve getting you up there. So
yeah,
talk a little bit more about your experience on that topic.
Yeah. And let me also say, a book about Amazon, and really what I did then in the book is examine Jeff Bezos' letters to shareholders. So he wrote the first one in 1997. His last one is in 2020, was his last letter as CEO, and then Andy Jassy took over as CEO. But as I read through those letters, several things struck me, and that's where the 14 principles come from. One of those is that Bezos was very much willing to take strategic risks. And one of his core ideas that he talks almost throughout the whole series of letters is this idea of experimentation is required in business. And by its very nature, an experiment is going to fail. You don't know that it's going to be a success. And so you've got to be comfortable with failure, not just as a who cares, but as a strategic stepping stone to figuring out what is the best thing to do. And he said multiple times that Amazon is actually the best place in the world for an employee to fail. And I always like to try and emphasize too, Amazon has an intolerance for incompetence. So it's not that, but it's being willing to have an idea and being willing to test that idea. And he goes on to say that, if you do an experiment and you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment, right? There always is that risk of it failing, but how do you learn from it and how do you move forward with it? And that's actually my first principle, which is encourage successful failure, which generally is not two words you see used together very much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as I've read through your book, and by the way, folks, it's a fascinating book. You need to grab it if you're any kind of a student of business management, business principles. This is a great thesis. And again, kudos to Steve for the way he's put it together here. One of the things that stood out to me when you look at the legacy of Amazon in the early years, they weren't posting any profit and paying any big dividends. How did they get away with that?
Well, one of the other principles I talk about is long-term thinking. And so Jeff Bezos either learned or intuitively knew that not thinking short-term was not the path to success. And unfortunately, Wall Street has gotten many, if not most businesses, into this idea of quarterly earnings and quarterly calls and, our guidance for where things will be. And Bezos pretty much ignored it. And, again, the early press around Amazon was, Amazon.bomb, right? But he resisted that pressure to change what he felt was right. And the right way to lead Amazon was planning for the long term. Now, we have the benefit of looking back over 28 years now of history, and all that money they did make money, but they reinvested it into building fulfillment centers, building a logistics network that today is really unrivaled. Even with UPS and FedEx and USPS, and actually they have created a whole nother business around delivering packages for other companies. But that took massive amounts of investment early on to build that up. But now they're seeing the benefit and the results of that because they were focused on the long term. And he felt very strongly that that would be a benefit for Amazon.
So it was a matter of convincing those early investors that they needed to shift their mindset about risk and return.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and one section of the first letter, which is 1997, again, the first letter as Amazon as a public company, he had a whole section about here's what we believe, long-term thinking. We will make decisions based on long-term. If that doesn't fit your investment philosophy, you shouldn't buy our shares. So he was very upfront, very focused on that, and tried to, I would say, warn people that, this is not the normal business, that we will always be focused on short-term gain, not long-term gain.
It's always interesting when I think about that, when you think about all the public filings and everything and the prospecti that people use. there's language that says we think we're going to do this, but here's the reasons we might not. And he did it kind of totally upside down.
Exactly. Here are the reasons why you shouldn't invest.
We're not going to do this over here,
Yeah.
and here's the reasons it's a good reason to do that.
Well, and Doug, that's really one of the principles is Bezos is very counterintuitive to quote normal business practices in all kinds of ways. I could give you lots of examples, but that's, I think, one of the secret sauces that that he was able to build into Amazon and has led to, and I would say their obvious success. And I also want to say, if you're a smaller business, you may be thinking, I don't want to be an Amazon, or I'm never going to be an Amazon. And that's probably true. The conditions now are very different from then. And that doesn't mean there are things that Bezos did and Amazon did that you couldn't learn from and impact positively your business.
I think that's a great point. So I tell you what, on that note, let's go ahead and hit the basic outline of those 14 things you gleaned from all those letters, those 20 plus years. As I recall, there were 4 primary segments. So talk about those first.
Sure. So again, 14's a lot, no question. So we broke those down into what we call 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale. And they really follow the, I would say potential or possible life cycle of a business. When you're first starting out, you're testing all kinds of things. You don't actually really know what's going to work until you experiment and test. Build is, okay, we've got an idea. It looks like it's got great potential. How do we build on that idea, that product, that service, that platform? Accelerate is, okay, we've built it. Now, how do we accelerate and maximize the infrastructure that we've built around that particular service? And then the last scale, how do you grow from there and not fall back or lose your ability to actually continue to take risks to push the business forward? And these 4 cycles could be part of the business overall, but they also could be part of a department or a particular product that you go through. So I believe this is an ongoing process in businesses. And then within each of those 4 cycles are certain principles that I think kind of emphasize what you need to learn or think about within each of those categories.
So I'm just curious, and I don't recall from reading the book, did Bezos have a vision of anything close to what it's turned into today? Or, he started out in the book world, right? Trying to really disrupt.
Yeah, and I guess I would rephrase that a little bit, Doug, in that he didn't choose books because he thought he liked books or he thought they were great. He chose books as the first thing they went after. He actually had a list of about 20 different types of products that he could have picked. The advantage for books to start with was a couple-fold. One is a book is a book is a book. Doesn't matter where the book is, it's exactly the same. So there's no variation there. 2, when they moved to Seattle, one of the reasons he went there is at the time, the 2 largest book distributors were within a relatively easy drive of Amazon's headquarters. Headquarters is giving it something now that we know, kind of fast forward a number of years. But they would get an order for a book and they'd actually put an order in with the distributor, literally drive and go pick it up, bring it back, package it, and mail it off. Now, these were not yet the days of, 2-day shipping or 1-day shipping. So, but people didn't expect it. If I got a book in a week, that was great.
Yeah.
So, and then they added video, and they very quickly added more items to quote their stores. And he always had that vision. He knew they would be adding new things once they really proved the model, and they did that with books.
Yeah. Well, in the behemoth that Amazon has become, they've had so many spin-off industries, not just businesses, but total industries
Correct.
that have spun off. And, now there are people teaching how to open an Amazon storefront and do your fulfillment without ever taking possession of inventory and being a retailer, which is, very contrary to the long standing tradition of what it means to be a retail seller of goods and services. So it
And I've got to say, Doug, think about that. So early 2001, 2002 is when they first had the idea of marketplace. And actually, again, to emphasize my first point, marketplace was the third iteration of them trying to allow third-party sellers to sell on their site. The first two flopped completely, but they believe very strongly that they could leverage what they've built and help small businesses, the third-party sellers, again, as you said, use their website and use their fulfillment network in order to grow their own business. And how counterintuitive is it to allow your competitor on your website? I mean, nobody did it. In fact, nobody's done it for years, up until really the last couple of years. Walmart's trying to do it. Target's trying to do it. Same concept, but it's so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And I think in 2018, over 50% of all sales on the Amazon.com were by third-party sellers, not Amazon-owned products.
Well, it's definitely had a ripple effect in the economy. And I was introduced a couple of years ago to the idea that there now are even, for a long time in the small business world, there have been business brokers.
Mm-hmm.
You or I go start up a business, we run it up to a certain scale and we decide we want to exit. So we hire a broker to help us sell the business and get that wonderful liquidity payday of doing that. There are actually now business brokers that do nothing but sell Amazon stores that people have created.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, the
like
aggregators, putting them all together,
aggregators,
all kinds of activity going on with Amazon, as you say, storefronts that people have built and created, and then coming in and buying them. Yep.
Well, okay. So one more time, just for clarity, you say the 4 pillars again:
test, build, accelerate, and scale.
Test, build, accelerate, and scale. And what I think about when you say that is, I'm pivoting my thought to the small business world now. So many times I go into an owner that they feel stuck. They want to grow their business, so immediately they pivot over to the sales, marketing, and lead gen kind of aspect of things. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that, but when they then start talking about marketing and sales, immediately you'll hear the marketers tell them, well, we've got an A/B test, so we need to, you've got a message. Did you say that again? Oops, sorry. You think you've got an idea. Let's create the A/B testing of it and see which one lands better. And it's seldom that I hear an owner say, here's my service. Now, how do I test that? How do I prove that that's really viable in the market? So what else did you run into thinking about that aspect of that first pillar?
Yeah. So again, that's part of the experiment. And the way I phrase it now is experimentation leads to invention, which allows innovation. And I think one of the things a lot of businesses get out of order is the focus on innovation without a focus on experimentation and invention. So that's part of it. And probably, let me give you a couple Amazon examples, maybe to help dive a little deeper in that. In 2014, Jeff Bezos got on stage, looking a little like Steve Jobs, I think, and announced the Amazon Fire phone. Amazon created, built, it was Bezos' pet project. He wanted to have a phone that was Amazon's. Now, the problem is Jobs already came out with the iPhone in 2007. We already had number of Android phones. Who needed another phone? It wasn't unique enough. It allowed you to shop on Amazon a little more easy, but kind of like, so what, right? So unfortunately, it was a huge failure. End of 2014, they wrote off $178 million in development and inventory costs. At one point, they priced the phone at 99 cents and you couldn't give it away. Huge failure. 4 months after that phone was announced, Bezos got his first demonstration of a cylinder that sits on a table or a counter and you can talk to, and it will answer you. And now we know as the hardware is the Echo, the software that makes it work is Alexa, right? Machine learning software. Very crude early days, but all of the learning that they had with the Fire phone, the voice processing and antennas and all kinds of different things, they were able to translate and transfer a lot of that into the Echo device. And I think we can safely say that's a pretty successful product line right now.
Yeah, no kidding. And not to dumb it down, but it almost reminds me of the traditional story of how we got Post-it notes.
Yes,
Somebody was trying
right.
to invent a glue that was very adhesive, and they, couldn't get it, and they had it on this paper, and it could peel and be reapplied, and all of a
Yep,
sudden we have a whole new product.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Interesting. Well, I tell you what, Steve, we're probably at a good place for a little bit of a break point. We're going to insert a bit of a message from a sponsor here. And when we come back, we're going to dive more into the details of these other elements that have been revealed in the Bezos letters. Hang with us. We'll be right back.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to DougThorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to DougThorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's DougThorpe.com.
All right, everyone, we're back. I'm talking with Steve Anderson, and our topic today is something simply called the Bezos Letters. But more importantly, it's a body of work and a book that Steve has put together that highlights some really key principles that all of us as business owners can take to heart and follow to help strengthen, grow, and scale the businesses that we have. We were talking about 4 pillars, and Steve, let's pick back up on number 2.
Second one is build. And I think one principle in there that is maybe helpful is obsess over customers. And really interesting, again, referencing back to that 1997 letter, another section that Bezos wrote in there is that we will obsess over customers. And to me, it's always struck me as a really interesting choice of words. A lot of business owners talk about the customer journey and customer service and customer focus and those, but when you obsess over customers, there seems to be a different level of focus on customers with that word. And in fact, there are some negative connotations of that word, right? You're over obsessing or you're too focused on it. And at Amazon, everything starts with the customer and works backwards. And again, let me give you an example. And I really do like this example. So one of the things that Amazon realized is that with toys specifically, those packaging that you see toys, clamshell, clear, in boxes, on the shelf at either Walmart or Target, they need that visibility on the shelf. So the kids, my granddaughter may walk by and go, "Papa, I want that one." And of course, my response is only one. But, all the trouble of getting those toys out of the packages. Literally, there was a Christmas. We were with one of my daughters and 4 of her kids. So there were 4 grandparents, 2 parents, 4 kids 8 and under, all the wrapping paper taken off. Now we had to get the toys out of the packaging, right? And the pocket knives are coming out, and the scissors, and right, all of the trouble of getting it done. Well, Amazon realized that on their site, Amazon.com, they use pictures, not packaging, to sell. And so they started working with manufacturers to create special, frustration-free, easy to open packaging. And benefits, actually, there are several. One is lower cost to ship because they don't have to add into another box, right? So they a lot of times can just ship it in the box where it comes in. It reduces or increases the amount of recycling that people can do with the packaging. And again, easy to open, no frustration there. And Amazon, because of customer obsession, knows their customers' wants, needs, and desires so deeply that they're able to invent on their behalf. And frustration-free packaging is one of those things. And, fast forward to today, and I don't know the current number, but there are literally hundreds of products sold on Amazon in frustration-free packaging, and saving people's time and frustration, as well as Amazon being able to ship less expensively so they can lower the cost of their products that they sell.
Yeah. And I think we've all probably experienced that and didn't even think twice about that being a strategic shift
Yep.
in the way things are happening, because I know you're right. You go to the Amazon website, you're looking for things, and I'm kind of in the same game as you. I've got 7 grandkids, and it's not uncommon when they come to Tootie and Bud's house that there's going to be sit in somebody's lap and shop for something on Amazon.
Yep, exactly.
we don't even drive to Target anymore. As much,
exactly. Right. That's exactly right.
But
Yeah.
But you're right. You see the image, and even when it comes, it's a much stripped down packing rather than the old heavy duty shrink wrap with the heavy zip ties and all that stuff you had
Yep.
to frustrated to get out of. Interesting. So it's that obsessed with the customer. And again, shifting back to the normal small business clientele that I work with, I think everybody will tell you without a doubt, they do try to do their work with some customer in mind. But I don't know that I've got anybody that is as obsessed with that as you're describing, because inevitably it's more of a 2-lane highway idea. It's like, well, here's what I want to provide as a business, is where's the customer going to meet me on that bridge, and can it work? Can there be a fit? But it sounds like Amazon went all the way over the bridge and said, no, what do they need?
And again, that phrase, they so deeply understand the customer, and he uses this a lot. We can invent on their behalf, meaning we're not listening. We're seeing what their problems and frustration points are and inventing ways to reduce that. And I guess my question, to your clients or other small businesses is, what frustrations have you introduced in your interaction with your customers that you could eliminate with some work and thought, and that improves the customer experience with you, no question, but also improves retention and all of those other impacts.
As you say that, I'm thinking about that, introducing the frustration to the customer. A good friend of mine, we were having breakfast not long ago, and he was telling me he had one of these customer service experiences with somebody. I don't know if it was his phone or cable or something, but he's talking to this agent, and the agent said, well, you're going to have to go to this web link and do da, da, da. And my friend said, no, I'm not going to have to do anything.
Yeah.
You're going to go there and you're going to put in the information that you're telling me I need to put in, because you've got to fix this problem.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
And
again, people, businesses are always focused on their customers, but the question is how deeply and how much. And the benefits to that are multifaceted.
Right, right. So what's our third pillar now that we need to remind people
So
of?
accelerate. So we've been through test, build, accelerate. And again, several principles here. I think the one I'll highlight is called generate high velocity decisions. And the genesis of this one is that as businesses grow, there tends to be the slowing down of decision making. So think about, I have an idea that I want to test, but now I have to go to my supervisor, and the supervisor has to go to the divisional VP and whatever the hierarchy is to get something done. And Bezos believes very strongly that decision making should be pushed down to the lowest group of people capable of making the decision. And he describes two different types of decision, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 decisions are big. Bet the company. Those need to be made slowly, thoughtfully, with as much data as you can gather. But he said most decisions in a business are not that type. They're type 2, which are decide, move forward. If you don't like the direction that decision is taking you, you can easily switch or change or go back and make another decision. And he said again, and I'll call it unthoughtful risk aversion. When you move type 2 decisions to type 1, all you do is slow your growth because it just takes longer to respond. And so that's, I think, a great process. And kind of supporting that at Amazon really are two things. One is called the 2 pizza rule, which is a team can't be any bigger than what 2 pizzas can feed. So small teams of capable people with the power to make decisions, because again, if they're type 2 and it's a wrong decision, you can change it. The second they use in meetings is called the 6-page memo. So in 2004, Bezos banned slide-oriented presentations at the senior leadership meeting, and then went through all of Amazon. So you won't see slides presented. Instead, the person calling the meeting writes a written memo, maximum of 6 pages. There's some structure to what goes in it. And that's actually passed out at the beginning of the meeting, not beforehand. Because Bezos said executives are busy. They say they're going to read it. They don't, and they come to the meeting unprepared. So let's fix it. We'll take the first 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of a meeting. Everybody reads the memo. Everybody's on the same page. And now we can discuss questions, what we don't understand, maybe the data we don't think is right, and make a more informed and end up being quicker in our decision-making process.
I think as you describe all that, I think of so many instances that I've had the privilege of being a part of, but trying to help change, and that is some decision-making process. And one aspect that I've run into frequently, it's been dubbed the 75% rule, and that's not related to the pizza or the 6-page memo, but rather the notion of when we want to analyze our decision process and we see an opportunity, let's look at the pros and cons. There's some really big companies that evolved with cultures that said we have to exhaust all the details. We have to get 100% of the data to inform our decision. And we won't make the go, no go until we have that 100%. Well, the classic 80-20 rule kicks in, and
Right.
the first 80% of data may be readily available, may be easy to get your hands on, but that last 20% is going to be incredibly hard to find
Right.
and figure out. And the time and effort and expense it takes to get that, you've probably missed the opportunity in the market. It's sailed by. You were asleep on the sideline. And B, it's not going to add any tangible value to that original 80% of the data, which probably gave you a good indication of what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So getting rid of that kind of, and then some call it paralysis by analysis. You overanalyze your decisions, and or you include that layering of authority to get a decision out on the street.
Right. Exactly.
Terrible.
Yeah, and that's very much at the culture at Amazon, and really is the idea behind the 6-page memo, because it's really hard to write that, and getting it I can't get the word out. Hang on a second. Getting it streamlined down to the point where you get the information across, but you have limited space. And so you've got to make sure you only include what's important.
Kind of related to that, I'll share this real quick, and I've written about it before. I call it present the bottom line first. I had a senior officer in the Army where I worked. When we were doing decision documents and memos, he told me he insisted on the top line, the top section being the bottom line.
Yeah.
What are you going for here? And then, we would sort of build the circumstance, opportunity, backstory, all of that below it.
Yep.
And his argument was this. He said, on the off chance we've been talking about this for a while, and now it's time to write the authority memo, just give me the bottom line at the top. If I've already bought in and I see this paperwork coming across my desk, if I can see this is the memo for this issue, I'm going to trust that you're not fabricating any other detail in the body of the document, but I'll sign and approve what's getting done here when I see the bottom line.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to turn to 6 pages to find the bottom line of which,
because they're going to turn to it anyway, right?
Which topic am I trying to sign?
Yeah, exactly.
So I've coached a lot of executives to maybe consider enforcing that in their domains to try to get people to go to the bottom line first.
Yeah, exactly.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
So let's come around, or let's round the bases and go for home. What's the scaling aspect there? Number
So
4.
scale is, how do you grow and preserve your culture, basically, as a company? How do you grow and maintain standards? How do you look at data, kind of back to your point of the, 80% and trying to get that extra 20%. But I think the real core, and it is the last principle, it's called believe it's always day one. And in that first letter, and what's interesting with that letter, and the reason I keep referring back to it, is Bezos included a copy of that first letter in every other letter that he wrote. He always included a copy, which, again, you think about long-term thinking over 4 years of writing these letters, to still have that document relevant to them, I think is pretty interesting. He said a couple things there. One is, he said, this is day one for the internet and for Amazon.com if we execute well. So this idea of it being day one, and every letter past that, the last line or in part of that last paragraph, he would reinforce it's still day one. Even with the challenges we've faced, this is 2019, it remains day one. So that's a very important concept to Bezos and at Amazon. In fact, he named the office building where he had his office the day one building. Mm-hmm. And kind of to explain that idea, in 2016, he was on stage at an all hands meeting in Seattle, a couple thousand employees in the audience, large theater, and he was in the Q&A part, so employees could submit questions that he would answer. And he looked down at his note cards for the next question, and he kind of smiled and he said, well, I think I know the answer to this question. And the question was, Jeff, what does day two look like? And he answered by saying, day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And then he closed the meeting with, and that is why it's always day one. And then in his 2016 letter, he actually recounts that. And there's a YouTube video of him answering that if you want to go look for it. But he recounts answering that question, and he goes on to say, yet I'm more interested in how you protect a day one mindset. What are the things you can do? And he lists 4 items. The first is obsess over customers, which we talked about. The second is a skeptical view of proxies. And we didn't touch in this very much, but it's the idea of if process and procedures aren't serving the customer, then you need to have a skeptical view. Meaning, if you've ever heard a customer service agent say, well, that's not our procedure, or I can't do, it's not serving the customer. 3 is an eager adoption of external trends. And Amazon's always been willing to, again, experiment and test, AWS, Amazon Web Services with cloud computing. They were by probably I think 7 years ahead of the first company that tried to have similar, Google, Microsoft, and a couple of other ones. And machine learning. And he identifies some trends that are there that are eagerly adopted. And then the final one we talked about is high velocity decision making. So not slowing things down. Those are what he called defenses of a day one mindset.
This is all just, I think really compelling, and anybody listening should pay attention. If you've got a business and you feel any kind of stuck, I think this is a great book to take under wing. It's an easy read, by the way. I don't know, as we've been talking here, I don't know if you've created a mindset that this could be a hard read. It's not. Steve's done a wonderful job of presenting it, and it really flows very well. And again, this framework is so incredibly valuable, and I think very applicable to any kind of business that I've certainly ever known about. We touched on, you mentioned, Steve, AWS. I think that is an interesting sidebar story you shared with me previously. Tell the listeners a little bit more about the background as you know it on that.
Well, one of the problems Amazon faced early on was, they're a technology platform, right? So website, logistics, fulfillment, warehouse, inventory, all kinds of things like that. And I would encourage you, YouTube, they have several videos kind of taking you through the fulfillment center. When you click on buy, what happens and how does it end up on your front porch? And it's just fascinating to me. But as they were building all of that, they were running into problems because different departments would have the same needs, a database, website tools, things like that. And they were all building their own version of it. And Bezos said no more. In fact, what he said was, and he didn't call it this because it really wasn't the name then, but they built a set of APIs that everybody would use. So all of that foundational infrastructure computing was all managed, and people could tap into that no matter what department they worked at Amazon. And one day somebody woke up, quote unquote, and said, you know what, if this is valuable for us and helps us streamline, I bet there are other developers out there that might find it valuable. And poof, AWS that we know today was born. And again, started out small, started out as just simple storage, storing documents in a cloud hosted environment. The cost was significantly cheaper. And then they just kept adding services and functionality so that many businesses run their entire infrastructure on AWS and don't have their own internal, tech stack and all those things, because that's not their core business. Let Amazon handle that. They can focus on what they do best. And by the way, it generates huge amounts of profits for Amazon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as businesses have migrated to the cloud, they're clearly, one of the chief contenders, if not in some people's minds, the top of the stack. And
well, from a market share, they continue to be the largest. certainly Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud are obviously working to chip away at that. But they had such a head start that I think it'll be a little while yet before they lose a whole lot of that share.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's continually improving the ease of use, the ease of adoption, and the cost of migration
Yep.
is continuing to come down. And by the way, just one side note on that, the cost of storage there, I go back to my banking days when storage used to cost us thousands of dollars per megabyte, and now it's fractions of a penny. You know, it's ridiculous how that's changed.
Yep.
But quick, funny. My wife and I love going to Las Vegas as our getaway. We've been there many, many times. Can't even count them anymore. But it's not uncommon when you make a trip to Vegas, you're going to bump into somebody having a conference, and you'll see a pretty dominant spread. Well, I've never seen anything like the one I ran into inadvertently, unbeknownst to me. We scheduled a trip. We arrived in Vegas, and AWS was having their annual conference.
Yep.
You could not open a door without seeing some reference to AWS. Restaurants were packed, streets were packed, rooms, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a highly energetic thing. And I'll give everybody an insight into the way my mind works. I thought, well, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. So when I got home, I wrote a bunch of social media articles about participating with AWS in Las
Vegas. That's great.
And of course, that keyword was on fire at the time because there was a lot of aftermarket velocity in the social media channels about what AWS was announcing. So all my articles got great press and everything. And I participated. I was working my way through the crowds.
Right? You were there. There you go.
No denial. But anyway, well, Steve, this has been great. I think we're going to need to go ahead and wrap it up. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So the book website is called thebezosletters.com. And I'm active on LinkedIn. So love to connect with you there. It's Steve Anderson. You'll see some insurance reference there to me, but I'm fairly visible on the LinkedIn platform.
That's great, Steve. Well, thanks again for doing this. And I am going to one last time tell everybody that's listening right now, this is a phenomenal piece of work and it's a great study. And I realize uttering the name Jeff Bezos is a love-hate thing for some people, but if you want to be objective and study a good read on business growth and business development, this is a good one. So jump out there and take a look. I do want to remind everybody that this episode is also available in video format over on our YouTube channel of the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, subscribe, give us a like, take a look, and certainly leave me a comment. I'd love to get feedback from people. If you've got ideas or questions about what we've been covering in our episodes, feel free to drop in. Let us know, and we'll make it happen for you. So thanks, everyone, for listening in. We hope to see you again real soon.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.